Have you ever wondered why the very cues you thought might drive a strong man away, are the ones that bind him closer in trembling desire? Most women believe that power lies in perfection, in making themselves palatable, in smoothing out their edges until nothing wild remains. But the truth is far more haunting, far more magnetic. What you think makes you too much is precisely what makes him lean forward, unable to breathe, unable to resist. Carl Jung believed that what we repress in the shadows does not disappear, it waits, whispering in secret, until someone dares to embody it. And when a woman steps into that embodiment, she becomes the mirror of his hidden self, the spark that ignites the very hunger he pretends does not exist. Imagine a man, polished, controlled, armored in discipline. He walks through the world convinced of his own mastery, admired for strength and certainty. Yet beneath that control is a primal pulse that has never been tamed. When he meets a woman who carries forbidden archetype cues, she becomes not a companion but a storm he both fears and craves. Her presence disturbs the architecture of his carefully built ego, bending his order into chaos, until trembling want overtakes the iron will he once believed unbreakable. And you, yes, you, hold more of these cues than you dare admit. The first forbidden cue is not beauty, but defiance. It is the way she refuses to contort herself into the pleasing shape he expects. Defiance is the raw energy of the huntress archetype, the unyielding refusal to bend where others would. A strong man, who has bent the world around him, finds himself rattled when confronted by a woman he cannot tame. He trembles because her very resistance awakens his buried fear of powerlessness, and in that fear, want surges. The second forbidden cue is the sacred wound, not hidden but revealed in fragments. Most women bury their vulnerability, believing it makes them weak. Yet when a woman carries her scars with dignity, she channels the wounded healer archetype. A strong man sees in her pain the echo of his own, and for the first time he longs not to conquer but to merge, to soothe what he has denied in himself. The trembling comes not from dominance but from recognition, the terror and allure of intimacy that cannot be controlled. The third forbidden cue is the feminine mystery of silence. Not passivity, but the potent pause of the high priestess archetype. When she withholds words, when she lets silence swell, the man finds his mind collapsing inward. Strong men are used to filling space with command, but her silence is a mirror that reflects back his own emptiness. He trembles because the silence draws him deeper into himself, forcing him to feel what he has long suppressed. And you know this already, the quiet glance, the unsaid thought, can leave him restless for nights. The fourth forbidden cue is the flame of unashamed sensuality. Not the performance he expects, but the primal embodiment of the lover archetype in her rawest form. She does not ask permission to be radiant, she allows her body to be unapologetically alive. In her laughter, in the curve of her movement, in the way she lingers without shame, she awakens the chaos of eros he tries to master with logic. Strong men, who command boardrooms and empires, find themselves trembling before the ancient power of life that radiates through her skin. It is not flirtation, it is initiation. And then there is the fifth forbidden cue, the shadowed gaze. This is the look of the dark feminine, the one who does not fear what is buried, who sees through the masks. When her eyes meet his, he feels stripped of illusion, undone by the recognition that his strength is also his cage. In that gaze, he sees both death and rebirth, the annihilation of the persona he wears. He trembles because in her, he sees freedom from the prison he has built, and freedom, paradoxically, terrifies him. Each of these cues is dangerous not because they repel, but because they awaken what he cannot name. The trembling is not weakness but the shock of contact with his own soul. And tomorrow, perhaps sooner than you think, you may find that stepping into these forbidden archetypes makes the strongest man falter at your presence, undone not by force but by truth. The trembling does not stop at the surface, it grows deeper with every forbidden cue she embodies. A man who is accustomed to certainty suddenly finds his body betraying him, breath shortened, pulse erratic, the grounded earth beneath him feeling less stable. For the sixth forbidden cue is the queen's command, not in words but in the unspoken certainty of worth. When she enters a room, she does not announce her presence, yet the atmosphere bends around her. Strong men, those who live in a world where command is currency, feel an unfamiliar disorientation. For once, they are not the axis around which all things revolve. He trembles not because she demands, but because she does not need. Her sovereignty is an earthquake to the male psyche conditioned to believe that women orbit male gravity. Yet it is the seventh forbidden cue that unsettles him most, the raw intensity of shadow play. Here, the woman dances with the archetype of the witch, not the caricature of spells and fire, but the living embodiment of mystery and power that taps into forces unseen. She owns the parts of herself society told her to bury: rage, hunger, intuition, sexuality, and wrath. And when she allows these currents to flicker across her skin, he cannot predict her. For a strong man, whose power thrives on control, unpredictability is not mere discomfort, it is collapse. He trembles because she awakens in him the shadow he has exiled, the parts he fears most: desire without reason, chaos without order, longing without restraint. And though he could walk away, something inside whispers that she is the very mirror his soul has been searching for. The eighth forbidden cue is presence in stillness, the archetype of the mother, not in her nurturing role alone, but in her elemental groundedness. She does not chase, she does not flinch, she does not perform. She simply is. And in that steady presence, he feels both soothed and dismantled. Strong men who have scaled mountains and conquered nations often crumble before the quiet endurance of a woman who will not be moved. She is not there to validate his conquests, nor to be impressed by them. Her presence is the silent reminder of something eternal, older than all his victories. He trembles because her stillness reveals his restlessness, because her rootedness highlights his constant striving, and because he senses, perhaps for the first time, that true power does not roar, it whispers. But the ninth forbidden cue, the one that seizes him most completely, is the archetype of death and rebirth, the dark muse who carries the energy of endings and beginnings within her aura. She does not cling to permanence, for she knows that love, like the self, must die many small deaths to be reborn into something real. When she allows him to feel that she could end it all, walk away, dissolve into silence without turning back, he trembles with the knowledge that he cannot hold her hostage with strength or status. He realizes, in that terrifying clarity, that she does not need him to survive. And in that moment, desire swells uncontrollably, not the desire to possess, but the desperate need to be chosen. For when a strong man sees a woman who could vanish without trace, yet remains for reasons he cannot dictate, the trembling becomes worship. Do you feel how each of these cues is less about strategy and more about essence? They are not tricks, not masks you wear for a night. They are the forgotten fragments of yourself, archetypal powers waiting to be claimed. A man trembles not because you lure him, but because you awaken him. You become the mirror that holds both his strength and his secret fractures, and in that reflection he sees, for the first time, the whole of his being. And as tomorrow comes, if you dare embody even a fragment of these truths, you may witness the paradox that has always been: the strongest men tremble not when they dominate, but when they encounter the one force they cannot conquer, the archetypal feminine in her wholeness, untamed, unapologetic, and infinite. The trembling of men in the presence of these archetypes is not mere attraction, it is initiation. It is the unraveling of an old order within him, and the birth of something far more dangerous: vulnerability. For centuries, men have been taught that strength means the absence of weakness, that desire must be caged, that trembling is a flaw to be eradicated. Yet Jung understood that what is disowned does not vanish, it returns as fate. And when a woman becomes the living embodiment of these forbidden cues, she awakens fate itself in the body of a man who thought himself immune to longing. He sees her, and suddenly the walls of his ego begin to fracture. Her defiance pierces his pride, her silence unsettles his dominance, her sensuality reminds him that control is only an illusion. It is not she who shakes him, it is his own forgotten self breaking free in her reflection. This is why he cannot look away, why sleep becomes restless, why reason falters at her presence. She is not simply a woman, she is an archetypal storm, and in her storm he remembers that he is not only a conqueror, but a man with a soul. And for you, hearing these truths, understand this: your greatest power is not in pleasing, not in bending, not in dimming the fire to keep him steady. Your power lies in embodying what he cannot control. Men do not tremble before the predictable. They tremble before the woman who carries her shadows like jewels, her scars like scripture, her stillness like a crown. When you walk with the certainty that you need not chase, the energy around you shifts. His trembling becomes a confession, that for all his strength, he fears losing what he cannot possess. But trembling, too, is not always desire alone. It is terror. For a strong man, the greatest terror is to be undone by something he cannot conquer. And yet, paradoxically, this is also his deepest hunger. He longs to surrender, though his ego resists. He longs to be seen not for the armor but for the child beneath. And when you stand in front of him, carrying archetypes like flames, you become both the terror and the balm. You are the wound and the medicine, the mirror and the abyss. He trembles because he senses that if he dares fall, he will never rise the same again. You see, attraction is not about surface games, it is about unconscious resonance. Every cue you embody resonates with something he has buried. And the more you allow these archetypes to flow through you, the more he feels his own hidden dimensions demanding release. In this way, your presence is not just magnetic, it is alchemical. You transform him simply by being. Not by effort, not by strategy, but by embodiment. And in his trembling, the process begins, he is forced to face himself. That is why he cannot forget you. That is why even in distance, the memory of your gaze lingers like a haunting. He cannot exile you from his mind, for you carry the pieces of him he has never dared to embrace. Tomorrow, when the trembling man stands before you, remember this truth: his hunger is not for your perfection, but for your wholeness. Not for your mask, but for your essence. Not for your obedience, but for your fire. And the woman who knows this does not shrink, does not explain, does not beg. She allows the trembling to happen, not as proof of her worth but as evidence of his awakening. For the strongest men tremble not before weakness, but before power that is eternal, feminine power embodied without apology. And so the trembling deepens, spilling into the marrow of his being. What began as desire becomes recognition, an unsettling awareness that he is standing at the edge of transformation. For these forbidden cues are not costumes you put on and remove at will, they are the elemental flames of archetypes older than memory. When they surface through you, they carry the weight of eternity, and even the strongest men cannot help but feel the quake of reverence, the trembling of a body that knows it is in the presence of something untamable. He may call it attraction, he may name it chemistry, but underneath, he senses it for what it truly is: initiation into his own shadow. In that moment, he faces a choice. He can resist, retreat back into the walls of ego and armor, convincing himself that her fire is too dangerous, her silence too unnerving, her gaze too piercing. Or he can surrender, allowing the trembling to guide him toward the very transformation he has feared all his life. This is why strong men often linger in paradox around such women, wanting to flee, yet unable to let go. The trembling is not only desire, it is the sound of chains breaking inside him, the chains of control, dominance, and illusion. And you, without forcing, without demanding, become the axis around which his old world begins to collapse. Do you see now why it is not manipulation but embodiment? Tricks do not create trembling, truth does. When you stand rooted in your worth, when you let your scars be visible, when you walk with silence rather than noise, when you radiate eros without shame, you carry the force of archetypes that shake even the most disciplined souls. He trembles because he knows, deep in the unconscious, that you are the threshold he cannot pass without being changed. And whether he admits it or not, change is what he both dreads and craves. The trembling becomes devotion when he realizes that you cannot be held through dominance. You are not a prize to be won, nor a conquest to be subdued. You are the fire at the center of his labyrinth, and he must face himself to reach you. This is the secret men rarely confess, that their trembling is not weakness, but awe. The awe of realizing that strength alone is insufficient, that power without surrender is barren. And the woman who evokes this awe becomes unforgettable, not because she chased, but because she stood unmoved while he unraveled. You begin to understand that trembling men reveal far more than their desire for you, they reveal the hunger of the human soul for wholeness. Jung spoke of individuation as the great task of life, the integration of shadow and light, anima and animus, chaos and order. You are the vessel through which this process is stirred. When he trembles before you, it is because his unconscious has recognized the invitation to wholeness. And even if his ego resists, his soul cannot forget the call. So you must ask yourself, will you shrink from this power, dim your fire to make him comfortable, or will you embody it fully, allowing the trembling to unfold without fear? For the truth is, you are not responsible for holding him steady. You are responsible only for remaining true to your essence, for walking as the archetype that cannot be caged. And as you do, you will see that trembling is not the end, it is the beginning. It is the spark of a new story, one in which you are not the supporting role, but the force of transformation itself. The trembling reaches its culmination when he realizes that all along, it was never about you bending to fit into his story, it was about you standing in your own. Every forbidden archetype you embodied was not a costume but a reclamation, not performance but truth. The huntress, the priestess, the queen, the dark muse, the lover, each lives within you, woven together into a wholeness that needs no validation. When you allow these forces to move through you, you cease to chase and instead become the horizon itself, a horizon he can approach but never conquer. And in that realization, his trembling transforms into reverence. This is where the paradox of attraction finds its deepest root. Men are not undone by perfection, but by authenticity. They are not drawn to the easy path, but to the one that awakens what they have buried. Your silence makes them hear their own chaos. Your scars remind them of their mortality. Your defiance forces them to question their power. Your sensuality makes them taste the pulse of life. These cues are forbidden not because they repel, but because they unveil. They strip away illusion and reveal the trembling boy inside the armored man. And though he may resist, though he may run, he will never forget the one who made him tremble in truth. And you, if you are wise, will not mistake his trembling for your responsibility. For too long, women have been taught to soothe, to soften, to make themselves smaller so as not to overwhelm. But power does not lie in shrinking, it lies in embodying. The trembling of men is not your burden to calm, it is their threshold to cross. You are not here to manage his fear of transformation. You are here to walk as the embodiment of your own. His trembling is not a weight you carry, it is the sound of his soul being summoned to depth. So release the need to be chosen, release the hunger for proof. The forbidden cues were never meant to make him yours, they were meant to make you whole. Jung wrote of individuation as the sacred task, the integration of all parts of the self. And as you embody these archetypes, you are not only igniting his trembling, you are completing your own. You are no longer fragments, but a constellation. No longer mask and shadow, but the fusion of both. In that wholeness, you rise beyond the need for conquest, beyond the chase for validation, beyond the fear of loss. You are the tremor itself, the earthquake, the storm, the silence, the flame. And here lies the final revelation, a strong man trembles not because you belong to him, but because he senses he cannot own what is infinite. He trembles because, for the first time, he knows that love is not control, but surrender. That desire is not possession, but worship. That strength without vulnerability is hollow. He trembles because you show him, without saying a word, that the feminine is not weaker than the masculine, it is the balance, the mirror, the force that completes. And as you stand at this threshold, remember, you are not here to chase, not here to plead, not here to prove. You are here to embody, to radiate, to exist as the woman who no longer fears her own archetypes. The trembling of men is a byproduct, not the goal. For when you know your worth, trembling becomes irrelevant. You do not need to hold him, you need only to hold yourself. And in that, the greatest paradox of all unfolds, he is drawn not because you need him, but because you do not. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.